S3. S3 is simple storage service. It is a scalable, durable, secure cloud storage. It's important to know that it is just the storage, and you pay for the storage used. If you do not use anything, you do not pay. If you use it more, you pay more. For certification, it's important to understand the different use cases S3 supports. And there could be a question like, oh, you want to have build a static website with some images. What can you do? What should you use? And the answer is S3. You could use S3 for static website hosting. You can upload your photos, videos, for big data analytics, like the lot of log files or lot of files. You can store those on S3. In case of disaster recovery, you want to store the backup somewhere, S3 is a good place. S3 is object storage. What it means is it's not like our traditional file storage or block storage, where the data is stored in blocks or in files. You have folders, and then the folders there are files. It's not like that. So what this means is, when we are dealing with S3, we are always dealing in terms of object, a single object. You put an object, you get an object, you delete an object. It's all object based. S3, to interact with S3, you use the HTTP REST API. S3 object, a maximum S3 object can be 5 terabytes. I don't know what kind of object can be 5 terabytes big, but let me know in comments if you have seen any object that big. Now, when you interact with S3, you issue the get, put, and post. So you use put to store object in S3, and a single put request object cannot be more than 5 gigabytes. Also, for objects greater than 100 megabytes, you should use multipath upload. You could get a question like, I have a 500 megabyte object. What should I do? Use multipath upload, my friend. Also, it's important to understand in which cases it's not a good idea to use S3. For example, you should not install operating system on S3. You cannot. You should not run database on S3, or you cannot mount the S3 drive. In S3, the objects reside inside a folder, and that folder is called bucket. So a bucket can contain like literally unlimited number of objects. There's no limit, and you can think of it as a big folder, master folder, like containing all the objects. It's important to understand that the bucket name is globally unique, not just in your account but like across the account. So if you create a bucket name ABCXYZ, I cannot create it. Nobody else can. It's unique. By default, you can create 100 buckets in each account. So if you want to create 200 buckets, you need to think, okay, by the way, you should not be creating those many buckets. But if you want to create, then you need to contact AWS. So in exam day certification, there could be a question like, I'm trying to create 200 buckets through a script and it's failing. What could be the reason? The reason is the default limit, my friend. You need to understand that. When you are creating a bucket, you need to specify the AWS reason. Now, why is the reason important? AWS reason is important because what it does is S3 is going to replicate your data across zone. It's not going to replicate across region, okay, by default. It's going to replicate across multiple zones. And this is important, like in some cases, you want to minimize the latency. You should be able to access the data faster. Some countries have restrictions wherein like the data has to be stored physically in certain regions only. The S3 bucket name is another important question comes up in certification. Like they ask what are different rules, like they will give some names and they will ask, is this a valid name, is this valid? So it's important to go through this list. As mentioned earlier, it is unique across, it's globally unique. It's important to understand that you cannot change a bucket name. Once you create a bucket and you want to go and change it to something else, no, you cannot. You cannot change the reason to. Once you create um, uh, a bucket in a particular reason, you cannot change. It's important to understand that the bucket name can be has to be at least 3 and cannot be more than 63 characters long. It can contain only lowercase letters or numbers. It has to follow the DNS naming conventions. Also, you can use hyphens. You cannot use underscores, okay, and no other special characters. You can use dots as well. The S3 object in itself can be of any type. It could be a JPEG, it could be a movie, it could be a binary. S3 doesn't really differentiate. You could store a zip folder. It's not going to do any optimization. There are S3 treats every object exactly the same. And the maximum size of one object, okay, can be maximum 5 terabytes. So what you can do is you can store 5 objects of 5 terabytes each inside a bucket. So you're virtually storing like 25 terabytes. That's also allowed. The object has 2 parts. One is the data, the actual data, the file which you're trying to store. The other is the metadata. Metadata is basically just a key value pair. In Java, you can terms of hash map or that kind of, it's just key value pair. And in metadata, there are 2 types of metadata. One is the system metadata. This is created and used by Amazon S3. So for example, it has the date, the content length, the content MD5, when was it last modified, that kind of information. And then as a user, what you can do is you can add some metadata attributes which could be related to your use case or some way you want to identify. You can later on query on that based on that. Now there's something called as key name. Now imagine there is a bucket and there are 100 objects inside that. How do you identify that? So you identify using the key name. Within a bucket, you identify an object using the key name. Now that key name also has some conventions, and they are different than the bucket name. You need to understand there is a difference between bucket name and key name. Key name can contain even slashes. That's why when you see in S3, it appears like a folder structure, but it's actually a key name. It may look like it's a folder and the folder and the folder, but no. It's just like in this example, video slash 2014 slash blah 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 blah. All this entire thing, including the extension, that's the key name. The bucket name is only the first part. Now we understood what is a bucket name, what is a key name. So now imagine there is an object sitting somewhere and then like you want to access that. So you need like 3 things: the web service endpoint, the bucket name, and the key name. All these 3 combined together is called the object URL. So you specify the bucket. For example, in this case, the test bucket is the bucket name, and the rest of the path after com is the key name. In the other example, as you can see, a slash b slash c slash d, it's everything is part of the key name. So in AWS, you're going to get different names, and they are going to ask you, hey, is this a valid bucket name? Is this a valid bucket URL? And they could ask you, what is the key name in this? What is the bucket name in this? What is the key name? What is the bucket name? Those kind of questions you will see. It's very important to understand that S3 is eventually consistent. What it means is eventually it's going to write it. It's going to finish writing it. It's not like your local file system wherein you write something and immediately you open another editor, you see the changes. No, my friend, it's not like that. So it's very important to understand, because in cases, say if you delete one object, right, and then you immediately say, hey, I'm going to access it, and you still see the object, what's happening? It's because S3 is eventually consistent. It hasn't deleted, but it's going to delete. It's going to delete maybe after some time. Also, if you post an object, you say, hey, I'm gonna update this, update my address. I updated it. But I if you immediately try to request and it's giving you the stale data. Why? Because it's eventually consistent. Eventually it's going to write it. And it's never going to fail. It's going to write it for sure. But after some time. S3 has different storage classes. Now this is very important in terms of the certification exam. They will give you different scenarios. Hey, I have some data and I don't want to use it. Like, what should I use? I don't want to use it for after 30 days. What should I use? I don't want to. It's okay for me to get the data in 5 minutes or so. What should I use? So these are the three different storage classes. Like, there's another Glacier, but these are the three commonly used. Like S3 standard. S3 standard is if you don't do anything, this is the one which is going to be used. And basically the data is replicated across 3 availability zones, and by default you're good with standard. But now if you want to save some price, save some money, then you can use the S3 standard infrequent access. You need to understand from the name itself, my friend. It's called infrequent access for a reason. That means you don't want to access it again and again. The data is again same thing. It's stored in 3 availability zones. Then it follows everything like high durability, high throughput, low latency of S3 standard. But the price, my friend, is little lower. So the price per GB stored is lower. What you can do is like your data could be stored in S3 standard, and you can define lifecycle policies to make it change to S3 standard infrequent access. But it is important that the charge per object is 128 KB, my friend. So if you have hundreds of objects which are like just 1 KB, 1 KB, 1 KB, maybe that might cost you more. So you need to understand. This is also another question like they could ask. Also, the minimum duration charge is for 30 days. So if you have, there could be a question like, I have a file and I use it, I don't need it like that frequently, but I'm gonna delete it in 20 days. Should I use infrequent access? No, because it may cost less, but you're gonna end up paying for 30 days. The retrieval fee you pay per the amount of data you retrieved. So if you retrieve only like, it's in GB, it's not in KB, okay? It's important. That's why it's important. And the same thing, data is stored in 3 availability zone. And there's another one called S3 one zone infrequent access. Now you have some data. It's the derived data. You can always derive that data. So, and it's okay if you lose it. In those cases, you can use this S3 one zone IA. And what it does is it stores is only in one zone, but the cost is like the amount of money you save is 20% less. So storing backup copies of on-premise data or recreatable data, you should use S3 one zone IA. So most of the times is going to be a use case driven question, and you need to read the question very, very carefully. You need to think how many days, what's the amount of data you're trying to retrieve, what are the requirements, to think and read the use case carefully.